Welcome back. Experts have warned that the COVID-19 pandemic is not going anywhere anytime soon. It's already disrupted many parts of our life as we know it. And next year, South Africans are expected to cast votes in the local government elections. The IEC has said that the vote should take place sometime between August and November, but the EFF is among parties proposing a postponement of the local government elections. The Red Berets at their celebration, an event to mark the party's anniversary this past weekend, said that they would actually prefer a combined election covering all spheres of government from 2024. Let's speak more about this then. Bring in Grant Masterson from the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. He's joining us from Johannesburg. Grant, good to see you. So, is it not too soon to make a final judgment on whether elections should go ahead in 2021?
No, in fact, we're actually very short on time. If we're going to make a decision like postponing the 2021 elections and rolling them into the national elections, then there's a significant challenge to overcome, particularly in the parliamentary procedures that would need to take place. So we don't have a lot of time to make these decisions. If we are going to postpone the elections, there's going to be a lot of work to do if we want to achieve that.
And much of the discussion since that Constitutional Court judgment on independents in particular taking part in the elections has been about evening the playing field for both the big three, if you will, and the many other smaller parties that rely on donations as well, but they get much less compared to the ANC, DA, and even EFF. Do you think combining then all elections so that campaigning happens at the same time would take us further in trying to even the playing field?
Look, I think my personal view on this is that I think we are starting to create some complex interactions in South Africa's electoral system, and I am a bit worried about that. You've mentioned the court judgment, which has introduced this requirement now that we allow for individuals to contest elections. So there's going to have to be an entire parliamentary legal process that plays out to facilitate that court judgment. It's been postponed for 2 years, so they have 2 years to do that. They're also talking about introducing electronic voting into the South African system. And, you know, these conversations are feeding into the broader conversation about whether electoral reform and the way our electoral system operates should be reviewed as well. And that's not even considering, as you referred to, the political party funding legislation that has to be that has to be practically rolled out now by the IEC. So all of a sudden, what was a very, very stable electoral system for a number of years, a system which enjoys the trust from most voters in South Africa. Yes, there are people who would prefer to see the system operate in different ways, but the electoral system itself enjoys a high degree of trust among South Africans. We're now starting to introduce a whole bunch of changes at the same time. And I think that when you put all of those things together, this picture starts to become quite complex.
I suppose the question then becomes, do we need two separate elections?
Well, I mean, there's always been an argument for rolling the local government elections into the national government elections. There are very good arguments for why you should do it. One obvious answer is that costs would come down, not just for the IEC, who has to run 2 elections in a 5-year cycle, but also for the political parties themselves, which may be part of what is driving the push for a unified election. You know, elections are expensive for the parties, and just like everyone else, the current economic conditions are hurting them. But at the same time, there are a number of legal challenges that would need to be overcome. One of the most important would be that there would need to be some kind of legal compromise and agreement to either allow for the local government elections to extend up to 2024 or to hold 2 local government elections, one in 2021 and then another one in 2024. And so there'd be a whole bunch of legal and parliamentary process that would be required to achieve that. And there's no consensus in Parliament that this is the way we want to go. The EFF and ANC probably have the numbers, but the other parties are not as keen on this. And so there would likely be some kind of court process as well, and we know court processes also take a long time. So we're really looking at a proposal that asks more questions than it answers.
So would it disadvantage the smaller parties then to have a combined election only in 2024? Because under law, as I understand it, an election has to be held within 90 days of the expiry of a council's term. If that doesn't happen, how big a threat is that to the electoral process itself and democracy as a whole?
Well, fortunately, we have precedent here. The IEC in February this year, March this year, went to the Constitutional Court and they got a dispensation to postpone by-elections that were required to be taking place during the lockdown period in South Africa, and the Con Court had granted that dispensation. So it's not impossible. These things can be achieved. My point here is that the legal processes are not quick, and especially when there is not agreement among all parties that these need to take place, then very likely you may end up with some kind of challenges along the way. As to the who wins and who loses, I think that's probably a calculus that is very, very difficult to work out. But typically speaking, the ruling party has fared worse in local government elections when they are separate from the national elections. And the theory has always been that because voters from the ruling party are not as motivated to turn out during the local government elections as they might be during national elections. If you roll all of these elections into one, then you may see a bounce for the ruling party, and they may actually enjoy a better performance at the local government election if you keep these elections as a unified whole.
Grant Masterson, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.